Hey, Strategy Simplified. I'm really looking forward to sharing my conversation with Noah with you today. Noah is an incoming analyst at MBB in consulting, and he has a crazy journey where he went from being on track to become a pilot and having that derailed by an injury, and now he is in management consulting. It's a really fascinating journey with a lot to learn. Specifically, Noah did not end up landing a consulting offer the first time he recruited, but he overcame the hurdle his second time around, landed the offer, and here we are today. There's lots of tips and tricks, mistakes to avoid, and mindset shifts for you to make to enable yourself to go through this transition successfully. All right, without further ado, here's my conversation with Noah. Noah Schmeiser, welcome to Strategy Simplified. Excited to have you on today. How is your Wednesday going?
It's going pretty well. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me on, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, excited to have you for what I hear is your first podcast conversation. But can you just go ahead and kick us off? Tell us who you are, where you're from, what you're up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a very recent graduate of the University of Virginia. I graduated a couple months ago. I did commerce, so finance and management at Virginia. Did some quantitative finance as well. Before that, I'm from Milford, Connecticut, which is where I am right now. I'm taking this podcast from home, and yeah, I'll be going into consulting this fall.
Amazing. Well, congrats on both graduating. That's a big accomplishment in itself, but also on the consulting gig, which I'm excited to dig into more throughout the course of today's conversation. So let's just go there right away. You're starting at MBB this fall. Can you kind of go back to the beginning and give us a high-level overview of that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start the story off, I'd probably go back to the beginning of college. And I actually came into college and came into Virginia on a very different path. And I was very interested in being in the military, being a military pilot. That had been a dream and a goal of mine since I was a kid. And coming into college, I was in ROTC. I thought that would be a great path. And that was really my 5, 10, 15-year plan. Because, when you're in that, being a pilot, it's a 10-year service commitment after you graduate. So that was kind of where I was going, where I was headed. And then at the end of my sophomore year, I injured my back. And the whole process with that kind of took that military option off of the table, just from a waiver and technical perspective. And so I was sitting there at the kind of summer before my junior year, end of sophomore year, really trying to decide what I wanted to do after college and where I saw myself going for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And consulting was an option, and it was an attractive option. I liked the idea of traveling and having a big impact early, being exposed to multiple fields. But it was really an option because I knew a lot of people that were applying for, I was studying finance and management and consulting, banking. Those are kind of the two big paths that most people go down. So I applied pretty extensively to a variety of places, sent in a bunch of applications, but didn't really have a great sense of what I was doing, why I was interested in the industry, and didn't really get very far with internship recruiting at all. And so then the year afterward, this past year, going into my senior year, I focused up and decided that, consulting as opposed to banking or finance was a path that I really wanted to go down, and did a lot to understand the industry, a lot to prepare, and ended up with an offer.
Amazing. Okay, though that's quite the roller coaster there for you. I'm sure having this kind of track, like, what you're doing, military, that's going for you, but then kind of have that taken away from you in a sense, and a couple years later you find yourself about to start consulting. So that's an achievement in itself, just kind of, I'm sure, rebounding from that. But you mentioned the first go around going for consulting internships. You didn't manage to secure a consulting offer, but you did the next year. High level, what was the difference? What was the change there that ultimately led you to, being able to overcome the hurdle this past year?
Yeah, well, David, it's a good question, and I think what it really comes down to is understanding the process. The first time I went through, I really didn't understand how recruiting worked. I didn't really even understand how, not just consulting recruiting, but recruiting for business jobs in general. And I think it's really difficult to succeed in a process that you don't fully understand. I mean, we see that, with this kind of stuff, but really in anything, if you don't understand what you're doing, it's hard to do it well. And I think that was the biggest piece that changed for me, is that I spent much of my junior year, recruiting and continuing to recruit for internships, sure, but also really trying to get a sense of what it was I wanted to do. And then, I decided, okay, well, I want to do consulting. What exactly does it take to get there? How can I succeed in each phase of this recruiting journey? The other thing I'd like to say is I think that consulting is very much a 2-year recruiting pipeline. I know a lot of firms don't consider it a negative at all if you apply for an internship and don't get a slot. In fact, they've seen your name before, maybe they consider it a positive. And I'd contrast that with an industry like banking or more financial roles, where if you don't have an internship coming in, it's really hard to get a full-time offer. I think consulting is much more of a 2-year process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that should, give some hope to people who were in your shoes, where maybe they weren't able to land the internship. And we hear these stories all the time, right? You try the first time, whether you're in your undergrad program or even in an MBA, it's the same. Like, it's a 2-year process, and rather than letting that kind of defeat you, you kind of decide to take it a little more seriously, understand it, and go for it. So, Noah, for you, you mentioned you had to really understand how consulting recruiting works. How would you break that down, like, to someone who's maybe coming in new, or you're speaking to Noah back then who wasn't quite sure what he was doing? Like, how would you kind of break down what the heck the consulting recruiting process is?
Well, I can't speak. I can't necessarily speak for the process everywhere, but I can speak to the process on my end, and what it looked like for me. I'd say it really breaks down into two kind of big parts, and not to sound overly structured or case interview-esque here, but to kind of break it down, I would say it's all about getting the interview and then doing well in the interview. And getting the interview is your application, it's networking, and then doing well in the interview. You have the case interviews. Maybe some firms have personal interviews as well. And for me, much of the focus there was on the case interview, but kind of going back to that first step, getting the interview, networking is a piece of it. Having your resume tailored is a piece of it. Writing an appropriate cover letter is a piece of it. I think those are all pieces of it. Choosing, where you want to apply, where you want to, firm, and then location as well. One thing that I struggled with during that part of the process was my resume. Tailoring my resume for consulting as opposed to just kind of a generic resume was difficult, because one thing I was told going through the process before I was applying is that you really want to have data, you really want to have numbers, percentages, say, okay, well, I did this position and drove this change, which resulted in this percentage and this impact. And it can be really hard to put things in college or, summer jobs you have, at 19 years old in that kind of framework. So that was a struggle. And I still don't know, how well I necessarily did that, but that was something I definitely took some time working through. And then on the interview side, preparing for the case interviews takes time. It's a grind, but it's something that I found that once I got the hang of it a little bit, I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I love how you broke that down. That's a great structure to look at the process through. 1, you got to get the interview. 2, you got to pass the interview, and not just one interview, but multiple interviews, multiple rounds. So it's not just something you can kind of show up and wing. So let's dive into a few of these pieces. I know folks love the kind of tactical tips and experiences here. So let's start with networking. What did that look like for you? did you reach out to 5 people or 50 people? Like, how many conversations did you have? Like, what tangibly did that look like?
Well, to be honest, Japheth, I can't remember exactly how many people I talked to. It was a good amount. And I mean, for me, it really looked like just reaching out to people that I knew, people that I found on LinkedIn. I got sort of a LinkedIn premium trial and kind of cast my net as broadly as I could. I looked at, I was considering really every firm, that you would have heard of, and many that I hadn't heard of before I started the process. And so I really just tried to cast my net as broadly as I could. Starting with the firms where maybe I knew people, I had friends from school or friends from home, and then really just working out from there. I would say, as far as a number, I definitely talked to dozens of people. How many specifically, I couldn't really tell you.
Yeah. And for people who are kind of turned off or scared from the word networking, because it has a negative connotation, for you, could you kind of define what the purpose is of networking? What was your purpose for networking, and how did that tie into like the eventual like offer?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people are scared of the word networking, kind of starting with where you started there, because it comes across as very fake, and it feels like, leveraging people. That's kind of inherent in that word, working your network. But I certainly something that I've been scared of at times, and coming into the whole business recruiting pipeline, I really had no idea about that part of it. I think for me, networking is about it really, at its best, is a two-way street where, people at different firms are learning about you, and you're getting your name out there, and maybe you're looking at a firm that your school doesn't really recruit with too heavily or something. It's a way for you to kind of get your name out there and have people know who you are, but it's also a way for you to learn about that firm and understand if it would be a potential fit for you. Maybe there's a firm that is super prestigious and really well regarded, but you reach out and you speak with some analysts there or some partners there and get a better sense of what it is exactly they do, and you say, okay, well, that industry isn't something that, as prestigious as it is, that isn't something that I necessarily want to do for the next few years. So I think it's really a two-way street, and about learning, as much about whatever company it is you're talking to as they are about you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Noah. That's a really helpful overview. So folks, if you're scared about networking, that's okay. Do it anyways. It will yield a lot of fruit. And, a lot of folks credit networking as, one of the main reasons why they got the job. Attention undergrad, master's, and MBA candidates. It's Japheth here, just quickly popping in with a reminder that there are a number of application deadlines that are coming very soon. I'm not going to read a list of a bunch of dates right now, but I would encourage you to check out the link that's in this episode's show notes to see the upcoming application deadlines for this fall. We've got MBB, we've got Big Four, we've got boutique firms that all have deadlines for internships and full-time roles that start in 2024. So we don't want you to miss the boat. Again, check out the link in the show notes for everything you need to know, specific application deadlines, how to apply, and more. If you'd like some help, preparing your resume, prepping for case interviews, or getting a networking strategy together, our team would love to work with you in Black Belt. It's our premium case prep program, gives you 8 hours of coaching, resume edits, networking strategy call, a bunch of online resources, and more to set you up for success. So we'd love to come alongside you in your journey into consulting, help you land an offer, and check out the link in the show notes for more. All right, let's get back to this episode. So, Noah, moving on, you gave a couple tips for the resume, but as far as resume, cover letter, just kind of application in general, do you have kind of one or two like pro tips or best practices that you feel like helped you in your application?
Well, I wouldn't call myself a pro, but I can tell you what works for me. I think one of the key pieces for me was realizing that you don't have to include everything you've ever done on your resume. I've had kind of a resume since I graduated high school, and at one point there were things I'd done in high school, and another point things I'd done in college, and and you really don't need to include, everything you've ever done. It's a resume is less of a, background check and more of a marketing tool, if that makes sense. It doesn't need to be a list of everything that's ever happened to you, but rather, a way for you to put your best foot forward. And I think when you think about it that way, you have a lot more space to really hone in on the points that you want to make and describe the positions that you held that you think market you best. And you can really cut out some of the fluff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. I think that'll give peace to a lot of folks, not try to cram a million years of experience onto one page. Or I'll have like a 3-page resume. Don't do 3-page resumes. Firms won't read it. Cool. Well, we've covered networking, we've covered application. I'd love to get into interviews, and this will be fun. But kind of describe, your approach, for full-time recruiting. Like, did you have a structure for case prep, and kind of what did that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So case prep was something that I really focused. I didn't focus on much at all when I was recruiting for internships, and I focused on a lot thereafter recruiting full-time. And I think the case interview was a scary idea to me, because I had a lot of friends that were recruiting for investment banking, which is kind of a parallel sister industry in a lot of ways. And investment banking interviews are very difficult, but there's a lot of memorization, and at least from what I've been told, if you know what to say and you kind of know your information, it's fairly straightforward. But consulting case interviews are very much a process. You can practice all the case interviews in the world, but if you get a question or a prompt that just doesn't align with something that you worked on, it can be difficult to rebound from that and to work through that. So I was definitely a little scared starting out. I tried to prepare as much as I could. I would say what my overall outline looked like was I started with a couple books, Case Interview Secrets, Case in Point, and kind of gave myself a bit of a foundation about how case interviews worked, how the process worked. And then I really just started trying to do as many cases as I possibly could. I had 2 case partners, one a friend of a friend who was also recruiting, and then a good friend of mine from Virginia. And we would just run cases. I would say we probably ran, cases where they would give me a case, I would give them a case, 3 or 4 nights a week, if not more, through pretty much the whole summer. I probably prep for 2 or 3 months. You kind of, it's definitely a roller coaster, because the more you do it, the more you realize like how little you know. But eventually you get to a point where you're consistently succeeding and you're happy with how it's going. And that kind of aligned with the beginning of my interview process.
Okay. So you really put yourself to it. You weren't going to mess around, and you got serious about kind of the out loud piece of the case prep, not just reading about him, but actually doing them. Yeah, which is super important. I
had an advantage, which was I thought would be a detriment. It ended up being a bit of a blessing in disguise with this process. I tore my ACL at the beginning of last summer, and so I was probably sitting around a lot more than I would have been otherwise, and it gave me a lot of extra time to invest in that kind of preparation.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
Wow, yeah, that's rough, but maybe a blessing in disguise. Well, with the case interview, is there a tool or a resource that you credit to as, something you would like want to point others to who are starting or, in the middle of case prep?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I have 3. The first would be case books from your college or university. I used the UVA, the Darden case books. I used the Wharton case book, the Duke case book. And these are free casebooks that are available online that are really great resources to look through, to kind of have consistent cases to go through yourself, go through with a partner. The second would be this podcast, honestly, especially in some of the earlier seasons of the podcast. There's some phenomenal case content, and if I had time, potentially at the gym or driving, I would turn on Strategy Simplified and listen through cases, and that just gave me a real sense of, okay, well, this is how people are doing it that do this for a living, do this professionally, and that's how well this kind of marries up with what I'm doing on my own time. So that was a great resource. And then the third, I think a lot of people, myself included, struggled with structuring, kind of breaking down a problem, framing a problem, more than other aspects. And I think once you kind of spend some time thinking through the structuring process yourself, craftingcases.com has some great structuring resources as well.
Amazing. Okay, that's helpful. 3 practical resources that you can go and find online and start to use. And we'll just say Noah was not paid to say any of that about Strategy Simplified, but we're happy to have you on. Maybe a little bit of a full circle moment there. So you go through the process. Can you walk me through, the call or the email where you found out that you got the job?
Oh, it was a really great moment. I was in my room at school, and the interview process was right in the first week of school for me, which was a little chaotic with classes starting and everything like that. But I'd interviewed that day, and I got the call that night, and one of the happiest moments of my life. It was a real, it was really exciting, put it that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. The smile on your face says it all.
It's a good memory.
Yeah. All right, folks. A good reminder to kind of, keep your eyes on the prize, and it is worth it. It's a lot of work, but it is worth it. Well, Noah, let's imagine you were sitting down with yourself, 2-ish years ago. What's kind of one piece of advice you'd want to give to yourself as far as, the journey that you were about to go on with, trying for summer internships, not getting that, but then kind of coming back around the next year and landing the offer? One piece of advice you'd say to kind of aspiring consultants in that position?
Yeah, I would say, as cliche as it sounds, don't compare yourself to other people. When I was going through the internship recruiting process, I just started at McIntyre, which is the UVA business school, and McIntyre is a phenomenal environment. It's incredibly collaborative. I had an amazing time there, but everybody's recruiting for similar things. And, as kind of offers come out, you start to see a lot on LinkedIn, and, you're bumping into people in the hall, and especially at a place where there's a lot of really successful people and a lot of people that are succeeding in this recruiting process. If the process is not going as well for you, as it was for me at that point, it was not going particularly well for me at that point at all. I really struggled with comparing myself to other people. It was a difficult time in that way. So I would say just, move at your own pace, handle what you need to handle yourself, and let everything kind of sort out as it will, but really try to avoid that comparison if possible.
I love that. I think that's so important to kind of block out the noise and just focus on what you can control. Well, Noah, you're starting at MBB very soon. Can you tell the audience, what are you most looking forward to on, day 1, week 1, and month 1?
Absolutely the people. From what I've heard, the people at most consulting firms, and especially MBB, are lovely and very intelligent and fun to be around. So I'm really excited just to dive in, meet some new people, and hit the ground running.
Absolutely. Well, we're thrilled for you, excited for you, and best of luck in consulting, and don't forget about us. Well, all right. Well, we're coming to the end of this fun conversation, and we're gonna do what we do at the end of every Strategy Simplified episode, which is ask you about a couple of personal or fun questions. So, are you ready?
I think so.
Well, on your resume, speaking of resumes as we have in this conversation, you have a couple words saying to ask you how to prepare a New York strip. So I just have to ask, let's have it.
Well, the background of that, I've always really enjoyed cooking, and I enjoy cooking steak. I started writing a bit of a book on some different kind of steak cuts and stuff last summer when I was laid up. But again, not to sound overly structured, but I kind of break it down into the two processes. You want to get a really good crust on the steak, and then you want to get the internal temperature up to a nice medium rare without overcooking the outside. So I use a cast iron skillet or a stainless steel pan. Get your steak really dry. Pull it out, put salt on it, put it in the fridge. Let it dry, get all the moisture out of there. Throw it in the pan for a couple minutes, get a nice crust, season it with salt, maybe some other spices as well. I like to use a little sugar to get some caramelization. And then I tend to throw it in a low oven, probably 225 to 275 for, 30, 45 minutes just to bring it up to a nice medium rare. But it's pretty simple. I love doing it. Definitely something that's brought me a lot of joy and a lot of stress reduction over the last few years.
Yeah, I can imagine. Man, you're making me want to go buy some steak. Well, folks, if nothing else, you got a great a way for cooking steak out of this episode. So thanks, Noah. All right. No, I've heard that you're a bit of an outdoorsy person, and specifically you enjoy hiking. Do you have a favorite kind of memory or place for a hike?
Yeah. I have two. One is when I was in high school at that summer camp. We went on a kind of a crazy 3-day hike that ended up with one of the days we were hiking for like 20 hours straight through the night, up in the Adirondacks. But that's a bit of a long story. I would say more recently, last month actually, I was in Poland, on the border between Poland and Slovakia with my friends from high school. We were doing a little post-grad trip, and we hiked the tallest mountain in Poland, which is simultaneously the tallest hikeable mountain in Slovakia. It's right on the border, and just had an amazing time doing that. Had a blast. I will say, up toward the top, the last 1,000 feet or so was very sheer. It was probably a little more mountaineering than hiking, and I have a profound fear of heights. Which is a little ironic for somebody who wanted to be a pilot, but it's more when I'm kind of out on with the chance of falling off, and that was definitely something that I had to face there. That was a little bit scary, but the views from the top were very much worth it. It was amazing.
That sounds incredible. A little terrifying, but incredible. Man, all right. Final question for you, Noah, here before we let you go, but. You played some sports. Do you have a favorite sports moment or accomplishment from your time in high school or college?
I'll go with the college memory, just as a little more recent. But I played water polo for the club team at Virginia, and my junior and senior year we made the national championships for the first time in 20 years, I believe, my junior year, and then went back senior year. So. Just being a part of that program and being a part of the the team at our regional championships to then kind of make the nationals, that was a big step for our program. And that was a really exciting time. Yeah,
no, that's incredible to go back after 2 decades. It's a big accomplishment. Awesome. Well, Noah, we really appreciate you lending your story to Strategy Simplified today. I'm excited to get this out to the good listeners, and thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciated it.
Noah's story is a fun one. It's inspiring, and I hope that you really got a lot out of that. If you're an aspiring consultant looking to kind of make the same journey into whether it's MBB or a boutique consultancy or Big Four, then we'd love to help. We have a program called Black Belt. It's a consulting prep program that gives you everything you need to enable yourself to make the transition into consulting at the highest levels. So we've got coaching, we've got resume edits, networking strategy, online resources, and a whole lot more, and we'd love to work with you. Go check that out via the link in the show notes to learn all about it and to register today. All right, we'll catch you again on another episode.